This is a big party, man.
Yeah,
I
brother,
can
like
dig it.
solid. Right on.
Hey, man, what's your name?
Good morning and welcome to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. That's 844-967-2789. You can text us at that same number. Hey, good morning to you, Calvin. How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good, Earl. It's looking like our weekend warm-up's going to start today, even though it's going to be a little windy.
Man, it's going to be 70 degrees.
It made me think of a poem. Spring has sprung, the grass is riz. I wonder where them birdies is. The birds am on the wing. No, the wings am on the bird. No, spring has sprung.
Hey, Calvin, did you get that?
I've never heard that poem before. But yeah.
No.
That might be Shel Silverstein. I'm not sure.
If you don't know by now, it's Friday, and that means Fridays with my co-host Sandy Williams. Hey, man, beautiful, right?
Yeah, spring has sprung.
Yeah. Yeah.
And actually, the birds are here. Yeah, I don't wonder where them birdies is. They're around.
Let me. So the vegetation around the house must really be looking good.
Yeah, it's
all the rain.
It's good, and then we've got actually, what's even better is what's in the forecast, which is like shorts weather for the next week.
Yeah. And that means I'll be out walking. You and I are going to connect and do some walking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because did I start the show?
Have we started? Are we on the air?
I'm there's so much to talk about. Sandy, I'm excited about next week when you and I get to walk in the scenic. For people who don't know, the walk down by the lake in Lake Park, Sandy, it's as beautiful as you can find anywhere, right?
Well, yeah, but I think there's probably beautiful places to walk in every place. I'm sure that out here in Waukesha, there's some beautiful walks,
right?
Scenic, old houses, nice, yeah, and so yeah. But the east side of Milwaukee is kind of unparalleled. When I was on business trips, I always took my running gear and I would run every city I was in, and no city had anything to compare with the lakefront run in Milwaukee.
Yeah. There's so much to talk about today, and we want to get busy. We want to get right at it. Sandy, if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit.
That's right. Yep.
The juice, O.J. Simpson.
Well, that was Mr. Kardashian, who sired the that was the beginning of the reign of the Kardashians in an odd sort of a way. But I was listening to the news on the way out here, and they were trying to portray that period in the mid '90s during that trial as a time that pointed out a racial divide, and that is not my memory of it. My memory was that it was the beginning of tabloid news in a way. It was the beginning of turning news into soap opera, the daily coverage of that, and it was like a soap opera. But that when it came down to speculation as to whether he was innocent or guilty, that it was not a racial divide.
The whole trial, it lasted a year, Sandy.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know of any other trial.
It was like All My Children. Really, it was a soap opera that it was better than soap opera because it was the real deal.
All of the cameras, and you're right, these sites, all these different websites, and that was the beginning.
Yeah, I think it was the beginning of whetting the American appetite for something that felt much more like tabloid news than actual news, and that whole trial really was a tabloid soap opera. It was a dream. It was a horror in terms of what it was about. The other thing, we were talking off the air about it, but the plight of OJ, the fact that he was acquitted in his criminal trial and then lost his civil trial, in which there was a wrongful death action brought by the family of the guy who was killed at the same time as his wife. The fact that he lost that is a demonstration of the difference in the burden of proof in criminal trials and civil trials. So in a criminal trial, you have to be it has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, and in a civil trial, it just has to be the reasonably likely outcome. So if someone thinks, well, it's reasonably likely, I have some doubts, but I still think it's reasonably likely he did it, then he loses the civil trial. But if that same person, the juror, says, well, I have a doubt or two, but I think it's more likely than not that he did it, uh, he wins that trial.
So, Sandy, you just spoke in legalese.
I know, but the
I
reason
know,
I
and-
did is it's going to come up in the whole situation of Trump. Trump has some civil trials facing him. He's got some criminal trials facing him, and I think the American public is going to become much more knowledgeable about this whole question of like the burden of proof. What is the standard that a jury has to consider when it decides whether someone wins or loses a lawsuit?
So those of us who are not privy to and don't understand the legalese of the law, I remember, Sandy, I was renting a house one time, and I was time to move, and I was moving, and the owner of the property said I had done some damage. It's normal wear and tear, but he said it was damage, right?
Yeah.
And so I talked with the people, and they said, "Hey, you can go to
Small claims
small
court.
claims court, and you don't need a lawyer. Don't worry about it, Earl. Go to small claims court." I'm feeling good about myself. I'm like, I know I got right on my side, right? I'm arguing here. I know that I'm right in this, and so I'm going to the court, and I'm feeling good about it, and I know, hey, I know I'm right. I'm going to win this. Well, that guy had an attorney in small claims court.
Mm-hmm.
And here I am with right on my side. I'm feeling good, and I'm, yeah, I got this, and they started, and the lawyer started talking in that language that only judges and lawyers understand. So we, as average citizens, Sandy, we think that the law deals with right and wrong, and the truth of the matter is, it's not that simple, is it?
It isn't that simple. It's a question of what the jury decides. Okay, and juries are swayed by various kinds of evidence. Number one. Number two, the complexity of the instructions to the jury. So, for instance, in a criminal trial, even if you think it's more likely than not that O.J. committed the crime, if you have some doubts, if that glove didn't fit, and that gives you a real doubt as to whether he did it or not, you can't convict him. Okay? Not in a criminal court. Now, in a civil court, uh, OJ could lose the civil question of whether he owes money to the deceased or the deceased family, because that's a civil trial. And the standard will be, do you think it's more likely than not that that's what happened?
So that verbiage again.
Yeah.
In the civil court, do you think is more likely than not? In the criminal court, the verbiage is not what I just.
No, do you have it
It's the exact opposite.
beyond a reasonable doubt? So do you have any doubts at all? You can't convict, and that's designed to protect the innocent, right? It's designed to make sure that juries don't just convict people willy nilly just because they get swayed by the arguments. And juries tend to take this pretty seriously, and so they try their best to perform the law and to implement the law as it's described to them and as they are instructed. And in that case, I think that glove probably was the source of the reasonable doubt.
So when you say the way it is explained, because the average citizen who becomes the juror does not understand the intricacies of the law, that's why that's explained to them before the case. Is that correct?
Well, it's explained to them before they go off to deliberate. The instructions are given to them. Okay, now you've heard the case, and here are the instructions. That's why what's this Eileen Cannon, this judge in the documents case against Trump, has done an unusual thing, because she's what most lawyers would say, put the cart before the horse. She's asked the litigants to come up with their jury instructions now, before the matter has even gone to trial and before the trial is initiated. And that's an unusual process.
Well, this whole thing about the law and all of those things gives me a headache. And others, because unless you have done what you have done, Sandy, and studied all of that, the law has been written down, right? I mean, that you don't create anything. It's all written in the books that you.
Yeah, but I mean, like I said, the American public is now going to be exposed to the intricacies because you take the January 6th trial against Trump. There, we're going to have to be the jury is going to have to decide one that Trump had the intent to incite the crowd to do what they then did, and it has to be deemed reasonably likely that he could have known or should have known that what he was saying and doing would incite them to go off and do what they did. Those are sort of going to be the elements. Without me studying the case, I would describe those as the probable elements of the crime that would need to be proven. So now there's a lot of judgment involved there. We all saw it. We would, if asked those same questions, we could reach an answer as to what we thought, okay? But with respect to his intent, that's going to be the result of looking at all kinds of emails, getting conversations that he had with third parties, trying to look at contemporary evidence to try and figure out what his intentions were. And then, what was it reasonably likely that his conduct would cause what happened? That's something that we all probably can reach our own judgment about. And a jury is going to have to decide, yeah, it was reasonably likely, and he should have known it was reasonably likely.
So, Sandy, let me ask you, all of those law books, who wrote the law? And how long ago? They had to start from somewhere.
Well, this question, like reasonably likely and all that, this all comes from English jurisprudence back in the day when there weren't laws written. There were just cases held before the court, and the scribe would write down the case result, and then the lawyers would study all the prior cases and got an idea. Reasonable doubt, proximate cause, this is what you'll learn in law school, okay?
Right.
But it all has to do, ultimately it comes down to this whole reasonable thing, and reasonableness ends up getting judged by the jury.
All right, 844-967-2789 is the number. It's Friday. That means Fridays with my co-host Sandy Williams, and we're going to talk about feds close to closing the gun show loophole. 844-967-2789 is the number. You tuned into the Earl Ingram Show.
In this dirty old part of the city where the sun refused to shine, people tell me there ain't no use in trying. Now, my girl, you're so young and pretty, and one thing I know is true. If you're dead before your time is due, I know. Watch my daddy in bed and crying. Watch his hair been turning gray. He's been
Who is this,
working and slaving his life.
Calvin, who is that?
Oh, yes, I know.
This is the animals.
The animals.
Yeah.
I like them. But they didn't have a lot of hits.
Welcome back. That's who it is, the animals. Welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. Can you imagine? Hey, what are we going to name ourselves?
The animals.
But anyway, it's Friday. That means Friday's my co-host, Sandy Williams. Sandy, before we get into, the feds looking to close the gun show loophole, let me, you talk about the law, and it was written, you said, back in the 1500s.
Well, common law, the English common law started way back. As soon as they started having courts, they began to get concepts like trespass. Trespass was one of the most important early common law concepts. And there was trespass on property, and then there was trespass on the person. Trespass on the person turned into the law of assault, right? If you assault somebody, you've trespassed their personal property, them, and, including killing. And a lot of that stuff ended up becoming statutes and laws. But the earliest regulation of interpersonal conduct in the English jurisprudence came through this principle of common law. And it's what law students study. You study common law in the law of called torts or negligence. And lots of the criminal code then was developed out of concepts that were developed in this common law. And once it becomes statute, now you have to go to the statute and find out what the statute says, and that's the law.
So before we get so far down the road, how then, Sandy, does the law ever evolve?
Yeah, the common law was totally an evolutionary thing. And the case law, the concept of case law, which is the principle of common law, but it's also what the Supreme Court looks at, precedent. And precedent evolves. I mean, look at what happened to abortion. It evolved into being legal, and then it devolved into becoming a problem again.
So is the law different if it was written by the English? Is that law different than the American law?
Well, most American law followed the English common law system, but the option to the English common law system was the continental European, coming out of Napoleon, civil law system. And in civil law, everything is generated by the state in terms of statutes. And if it's not unlawful by statute, it's probably not unlawful. And we have a couple of civil law jurisdictions. Louisiana is a state that adopted civil law as its primary jurisprudence. But otherwise, America follows common law principles.
All right. So Sandy, the Biden administration, the feds to close gun show loophole once and for all, unless Republicans get in their way. So the federal government,
I wouldn't hold my breath on that one as to whether they'll get in the way, because I'm sure the NRA will come forward, and I'm sure they'll call all their dogs to heel, and that's what'll happen.
Well, the Biden administration is poised to expand background checks on firearm purchases and close what is known as the gun show loophole, in a move that Republicans are already pushing back on. Under federal law, licensed gun dealers must run a background check on a potential buyer before making a sale. But unlicensed dealers who sell firearms outside of physical stores like a gun show or market or online are not required to conduct background checks. I witnessed that firsthand many years ago when I was interested in just what happens at gun shows. And I remember going in and talking with the licensed dealers about guns, and they would say, well, if you want to purchase this gun, you got to fill out the background check, 48-hour wait or whatever it was. And at the same time, I'm going to the licensed dealers. There's Joe Smoes walking around with 357 Magnums and saying, hey,
Psst, hey, yeah.
hey, are you a felon? No, I'm not a felon. I can sell you this right now without a background check. And I'm like, that makes no sense at all to me, Sandy.
No, I don't think it does. I mean, I think that what happened was that there was always kind of a loophole. You can give a gun to your brother. You can sell it to your sister. You can, the family kind of family and friend kind of limitation on the regulations. But that got expanded, and it just blew up. And this whole gun show thing is sort of like, casual acquaintances. You don't even have to be acquainted.
No.
You just have to be looking at the same gun at the same time, and that's all you need.
Or the fact that I can come into the gun show, bring my own weapons, and not have to be licensed and not have to follow the same laws as the licensed guy
Yeah.
and just sell it to anybody. That
You would think that the licensed gun sales lobby
would be against somebody
would
coming
be
in.
working hard to
Right.
make sure this didn't happen. And maybe they do work hard, but it isn't sufficient. No, it's a crazy loophole, and it really is designed, I think, to make casual sales of guns absolutely permissible. And it's probably one of the reasons, the Pandora's out of the box. Pandora's box is opened, and we've got 400 million guns and 20 million assault rifles. And whatever we do to close the door, we still have.
It's already.
Yeah, I mean, that's decades and decades of weapons that will be available to the public, as and if they want them, they'll get them.
So here's what they're pushing. Under the new rule, anyone engaged in the business of selling firearms for profit must register for a federal dealer's license and conduct background, criminal, and mental health checks on buyers.
Yeah, of course, one of the problems there is
How you going
in
to
the
enforce
business of.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not in the business of it. I just happen to have 5 guns that I'm going to sell. And I'm not in the business. I'm actually an attorney, but I'm going to sell these 5
it?
guns.
So aren't you automatically in the business when you begin to sell it?
No, I can tell you, we had this talk before about in the business of is particular language that has an important meaning that has to be determined, and it's not clear that you can have you can have a hobby and you're not in the business of it. My hobby, I sell guns every once in a while.
So see, that's that legalese again.
Sure.
And so they know when they write it in that manner,
Right.
it's going to give an out,
Yeah.
right?
I think that the Democrats, this is probably more eyewash than it is actually effective limitation. And the fact is that, like I said, with the hundreds of millions of guns and tens of millions of assault rifles we have out, almost anything we do now with respect to guns is eyewash, unless and until we start dealing with that inventory, that huge inventory.
All right, 844-967-2789 is the number. It's Friday. That means Fridays with my co-host Sandy Williams. Senate Republicans furious over Trump derailing FISA bill. Up next on the Earl Ingram Show.
If it's the last thing we ever do, we gotta get out of this place. Girl, there's a better life for me and you. Leave me, baby. waiting, tired of waiting for you. I was a lonely soul, I had nobody till I met you. But you keeping me waiting all of the time. What can I do?
All right. Welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. Text us at that same number. It's Friday. That means Fridays with my co-host, Sandy Williams. So, Sandy, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act,
FISA.
is a very important instrument that Republicans clearly wanted to, bring.
Well, I think both Republican. I mean, I think
and Democrats.
I think it's always been a bit controversial. People like the ACLU look at this kind of secret tribunal process and
So what is it?
worry about it.
So what is it?
FISA is the law creates a court that operates in the dark, into which the government has to bring requests to carry out surveillance that might involve American citizens. Okay.
Against you said a private thing. So
No, it's a government court, but it operates outside the
of the
purview
regular laws
of the public. No, it's got laws to follow.
Okay.
It just operates in the dark, meaning that if the press can't go and see what's happening, and the public can't go see what's happening because it involves secret stuff.
Okay.
And so, because you can't announce to the public who you're going to do surveillance on, because now they know.
Okay.
So it's a secret court designed to make sure to protect the rights of American citizens, to make sure that surveillance is not conducted in any manner that is not done with probable cause to related to laws that the citizen might be violating. And FISA has been used to do surveillance, in particular at this time of terrorism, to do surveillance that might include telephone calls that could involve American citizens on the calls, to try and catch terrorists before they commit their acts of terror. I mean, it's a primary use now of the FISA courts. It was used for other purposes
for
as
drug dealing and those kind of things as well.
So, it became controversial in particular because Donald Trump believed and asserted that that FISA gave some authority to do surveillance on his campaign because the surveillance was being conducted on Russian activities in the United States. And those Russian activities were believed to involve phone calls with Donald Trump's, some of his campaign functionaries. And in fact, it did. Okay. The calls did intercept. I mean, the surveillance did intercept some of that kind of conduct. But now, sitting on the sidelines, Donald Trump has it in for FISA and wants to get rid of the approval of it. The approval, the statute that creates FISA sunsets shortly. And now what the legislature, the Congress is looking at is renewing FISA. And most people in Washington believe that FISA is a necessary tool and that it does adequately protect private interests, public interests, citizen interests. But Donald Trump on the sideline is basically instructing his Republican cohorts to deep six it. And that's what's going on right now.
So, Sandy, just so people really grasp the gravity of what is taking place, conservative Congress and senators think that FISA is necessary for the protection of this country. And one man, Donald Trump, has the ability to derail that. I guess what I'm saying, 844-967-2789. I want people to think long and hard about the fact that this one man can upset what is in the best interest of our nation by by controlling congressmen and senators, United States congresspeople and senators, from his position as just a candidate for president. He's not the president. And so people should understand the magnitude of what is taking place if he can do that, Sandy. If he has that kind of leverage outside, he's just an American citizen.
Well, I said off the air, there are people who've had a lot of leverage. Rush Limbaugh had lots of leverage on the conservative side of the aisle. And maybe, in fact, Donald Trump has assumed the reign of a Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh wasn't particularly careful or deliberate about the positions he took. He was one of the reasons he was so popular was he operated in the realm of hyperbole, meaning exaggeration a lot of the time. He was flamboyant. He was entertaining. And he did have a following, and he was able to cause certain politicians at least to kiss his ring. But I would say that the numbers of politicians who are currently kissing Donald Trump's ring
is smaller,
is bigger.
Bigger than Rush Limbaugh. Oh, yeah.
Rush Limbaugh, I mean,
no
his circle is quite big, and it is concerning because I'm not sure that he's operating with any more deliberation or care than Rush Limbaugh did with respect to, for instance, FISA. If you get rid of FISA, is there to protect American citizens from unnecessary surveillance. If you get rid of FISA, you aren't going to get rid of surveillance. The American intelligence apparatus is going to carry out surveillance. I mean, it's going to do that. And FISA was installed to make sure that the surveillance would not infringe on the rights of American citizens in its processes. And if you get rid of it, quite frankly, I think all you're really doing is causing the protection of American citizens to be erased, but you're not going to erase surveillance.
Sandy, I don't understand.
Now, FISA was abused. I think it was the basis potentially, or maybe it was put in place in response to, you can recall 25 years ago or whenever it was that cell phones were being broadly surveilled, and American cell phone use was subject to being at least analyzed by, and it wasn't the content of the calls, apparently. It was really who was calling whom, when, and where. But that was a very troublesome concept. And so it's not, I would agree that the government being allowed to carry out surveillance with a free hand is a problem. I think FISA is a necessary restriction and is a reasonable apparatus, a reasonable process. And for Congress to sink it would be irresponsible.
So, Sandy, my issue with it is, even when you talked about the issue with the cell phones and the fact that they had overstepped their bounds, there are checks and balances, and there has been, and was always reserved for Congress and the Senate to make those decisions. But here we are talking about one man who is saying, "You've aggrieved me."
Well, I think I think the problem Donald Trump poses to American security is that he's opposed generally to the entire American intelligence apparatus. He's taken on the CIA and tried to diminish its reputation. He's taken on the FBI to diminish its reputation. FISA is a tool that's utilized in both regards. I think that the problem is, what's the end game? How does Donald Trump want the United States to carry out the necessary forms of intelligence gathering that is needed in a complicated world like we have? And does he really want us to stop gathering intelligence? Because that wouldn't be a very smart move.
Sandy, I guess my point is, why are we talking about Donald Trump being able to pull all these levers to control people who are in these positions, who are supposed to be doing the will of the American people, and yet some guy named Donald Trump is able to control them, and he's not even in office? To me, that's the red herring. That's the issue I think that people should be taking into consideration, even when they decide, well, I like Donald Trump. Well, you're talking about a guy who has that kind of power, who to make decisions to benefit himself and not the American people.
Well, he is the presumptive Republican nominee. That kind of person gets a
But
podium to speak from, and it can talk about policy. My problem with Donald Trump's enunciations of positions on things is that it seems to be without any basis in policy. Okay, this one is all about himself. They used FISA against me. I'll show them. I'll sink
yes,
FISA. And that's not the basis for sound public policy. What we want is deliberation. Someone who's wise. Okay, we want if someone standing on the sideline could have a great deal of influence because of the inherent wisdom of what they are saying, that's fine. I think the American system is made for people to stand up and speak their onions and see if they can have a following. But my problem with Donald Trump is that he doesn't enunciate policy, he enunciates positions. He doesn't have coherent policies, and it's not based on wisdom.
yeah,
I don't think anyone would accuse Donald Trump of having the W word.
I know, but yet, Sandy, he's able to manipulate these things and people in high places. To me, that's where the inherent danger lies.
I think the danger lies with those people that he's manipulating. I think his effort to manipulate them is something that's going to happen.
These are government
with
officials.
Well, but people with influence stand up and hope that what they say will have an impact on government officials. And the problem is that his does.
That's
Yeah, I mean, he actually does.
Yeah.
And my problem is with his positions and with the public officials who dance his tune. It's not so much with the fact that he's trying to do this or attempting it, because I think that that's part of our process. But I just think people should judge the source. They should consider the wisdom of what it is that's being enunciated, and then they should do what's right for the people. They should do those three things. And I'm afraid that none of those three things is being done in the sequence of events that leads from Donald Trump's announcement of position on FISA to what it is that might be accomplished.
Our phone lines are open at 844-967-2789, 844-967-2789. You can text us at that same number. Sandy, this is another one of those things, and you just stack them on top of one another, Sandy, and there's more and more and more and more. And you realize just how dangerous an individual this man is.
Yeah, I just looking at a flash here. Apparently, the bill reauthorizing the FISA cleared a House hurdle, so maybe Donald Trump's influence is not
waning.
sufficient to cause the House to do its own business.
Well, so having read that, do you think that the media itself that continues to, put this stuff out, knows that he doesn't have as much, juice as we think he has? I mean, the more we see it, the more you read it, the more you see it, in the news, the more you start realizing, hey, maybe this guy.
You shouldn't use the word juice today.
Okay.
But no, I mean, I think that the media coverage is half of what gives him his juice. Okay. And I think our discussion.
You just used the.
Yes, I used the word too. I'm reckless. But I think our discussion, I mean, we all do it.
Right.
The whole media does it because he demands it and the public kind of relates to it. But the fact is, the more we talk about it, the more influence he has. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. And so 844-967-2789 is the number. It's Friday. That means Fridays with my co-host Sandy Williams, and we've got a lot more on the other side.
So I just saw a video of him at 80 out on the stage, gyrating.
He's still doing it.
Still doing it.
Welcome. Welcome back to a Friday edition of the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. Text us at that same number. There's a lot going on today, and Sandy and I are going to get into it, especially in the second hour. A lot of issues with global implications, and we'll be certainly talking about those things. Let's go right back to the phone lines, and Tom from LA. Good morning to you, Tom.
Good morning, Earl. Good morning, Sandy. First off, we the people ultimately are the government, not one person. I really do think it's media malpractice the way that they cover the previous occupant of the White House. What they should be saying is they should be talking about the fact that this is not a normal candidate. This is not a both sidesism. This is our democracy versus authoritarianism. They also should be talking about the fact, especially in progressive media, they should be talking about the fact that how it is that he bankrupts a casino. How can you bankrupt a casino? He has 89 indictments. This is not normal. And for people to try to somehow normalize, and if I hear the media one more time say, oh, this is unprecedented. No, this is wrong. This is wrong, people. This is exactly what Hitler did do. And this is exactly what breaks down everything, the barriers of we the people, and the guardrails is a person like the previous occupant in the White House. I mean, this is just absolutely insanity that we even, when we talk about him, we all have to make him into a cartoon character that makes him kind of likable. That's got to stop. Because if not, we're going to be sitting with an authoritarian dictator just like they are with Benjamin Netanyahu, just like they are with Putin, just like they are with Erdogan. And yeah, I mean, Sandy, what do you think about that?
Hey, Tom, thank you very much for the call.
Well, I do think, in fact, you mentioned the cartoon character. If you go back in history and look at the rise of Mussolini in Italy, he actually was sort of, he was cartooned, lampooned, and he rose to become a dictator. And now he didn't, Italy, people don't think of Mussolini and Italy and fascism in the same way that they do about Hitler, but Mussolini had the same sort of autocratic authoritarianism and the same sort of bad instincts. He ended up getting hung by his people. So that was maybe the outcome of the people's rage about what they had done to themselves by putting him into a position of power. Yeah, I do agree. I do think that it's fun. It's easy for us to laugh and lampoon someone like Trump because he is lampoonish. He's clownish almost. He's like the Joker in the Marvel comics, and everyone has their view of the Joker. But electing the Joker president would be something that is kind of an awful prospect.
Sandy, here we are again. Speaker Mike Johnson is scheduled to appear alongside former President Trump on Friday as they find themselves on opposite ends of a pair of contentious debates on Capitol Hill. The gathering at Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort is being billed as a press conference to tout legislation that would prevent non-citizens from voting, something that is already illegal.
Yeah.
I think there's something, Sandy.
I mean, what gets me is how can these people be so cynical about the American public that they would announce that they're going to implement a policy that is so ridiculous on its face because it is unnecessary? We aren't going to allow illegal migrants to vote. Well, they aren't allowed to vote any place.
What gets me about it, Sandy?
Now, it might be that that residents are allowed to vote in some school districts. Okay, I'm not sure about that. But in presidential elections and senatorial elections, I can assure you that nowhere in this country is it lawful for an illegal immigrant to vote.
So my issue with it, Sandy, is here we are. The Speaker of the House goes to Donald Trump's, abode.
Yeah. And
lowers himself. He's the Speaker of the House. To go to Donald Trump's abode.
Well, there's this whole fiction that's developed about immigrants. No, they're voting. No, they're not voting. That that they are the result of people being let out of mental institutions and prisons. No, that happened with Fidel Castro long, long ago. It isn't happening but with proof anyplace else now. It's not like a significant percentage of the immigrants who are trying to get into this country have come out of insane asylums and prisons. Not true. But Donald Trump talks about it as if it is. And now talking about how we're going to improve America. We're going to make it illegal for these people to vote. Well,
But
it's
no,
not legal for
but
them to vote.
nobody sees a problem with the Speaker of the House going to Donald Trump's place. I could see if Donald Trump says, "Well, hey, I'm coming." You're the Speaker of the House. You're bigger than Donald
Like
Trump.
I said, this is this is ring kissing, or it might
Yes.
might even be worse than that.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Kissing something else.
Yeah, but it's unseemly, but it's happening. Okay,
I know
and so
that's-
this man has tremendous influence in that regard. And what I'm surprised by is that the news media hasn't straightened out people's thinking that when they announce that they're going to make it illegal for immigrants who are not citizens to vote, that the news media would say, no, they're not allowed to vote.
But there are people who follow Trump and believe in Trump, and they're just going to accept that he's doing this. He's protecting them. Had you not even mentioned that this is already illegal, there are people celebrating. You see what Donald Trump is doing?
That's my point. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that Tom from LA was right, that there is some malpractice by the media, that they allow a statement to be made that they're going to make this voting illegal. The next sentence that the media ought to cover is, that's an interesting kind of a statement, but that kind of voting is already illegal.
Sandy, this article is in the Hill. It's not in some low, paper. It's in Politico. And they're talking about something that is fictional and entertaining it as truth. Anyway, 844-967-2789 is the number. It's Friday. That means Fridays with my co-host Sandy Williams, and we're going to continue.
comes the sun, and I say it's alright. Little darling, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Little darling, it feels like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. And I say, it's alright.
All right. Welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. It's 844-967-2789. You can text us at that same number. It's Friday. That means Fridays with Sandy Williams and Sandy. Iran is doing a little more than saber rattling. It has talked about an attack, an imminent Iranian strike on Israel. Now, imminent, Sandy, when you use that verbiage, and I think the United States is saying sometime in the next 2 days that Iran has, and I guess everything that they've been able to deduce, that Iran is going to strike Israel. And Sandy, that's inconceivable.
Well, Israel sort of bought this, right? I mean, they attacked the Iranian embassy in Syria, which is like attacking the
land. It's like their land.
Well,
right?
under the principle of international law, an embassy is an extension of the land of the country. So attacking the embassy is like attacking Iran, and it's pretty much never done. The embassies don't get attacked, even in circumstances of head-on war. And and in fact, the United States, I think it was this morning, at least I heard this morning's news, that the United States was essentially admonishing Israel and indicating that Israel failed to give the United States advance notice of its intention to carry out the strike on the embassy. And clearly, the United States was distancing itself from Israel with respect to that, announcing to the world that we, the United States, had nothing to do with it. And I think they're setting the stage for the fact that if Iran does take action against Israel, that the United States will not reciprocate by taking action against Iran, that essentially this is Israel's problem. Now, so Israel has kind of bought this problem. Now the fact is they did it. Israel says they did it because they were striking at leaders of Hezbollah, and that embassy was a place where Hezbollah would have meetings. But still, it's a problem.
Sandy, so this is where they talk about measurable, right? Who determines what's measurable? Let's say Iran, because clearly if Iran strikes Israel's not going to sit still. They're going to respond. Tit comes to tat.
Well, most of the conjecture I've heard was that Iran would typically use a proxy to carry out its conduct. So the likelihood is that Hezbollah, supported by Iran, will carry out an attack on Israel, and Hezbollah attacks on Israel are not uncommon. So I think we have to wait and see how this plays out. But Iran has been, in spite of the fact that we talk about it as being this kind of wild-eyed revolutionary and fomenter of problems, is relatively conservative about what it does in its own name, and is relatively conservative in terms of how it conducts its foreign affairs. So I'm kind of going to be patient on this one. I think what we'll see is a conduct by Hezbollah, which will be indirectly supported by Iran, which will be aimed at Israel.
Let me ask you then, Sandy, because this is the kind of thing that our government has been warning about since the beginning of this, the escalation, right? They've been doing everything within our power to try to tone all of this down, because they knew in the end this could lead us into a situation that the world doesn't want to see. They don't want to see the United States at war with Iran, especially now that Iran has a partner in China and in Russia. And so these are delicate type times. Is that right? And as you stated, the United States believes that this thing should have never occurred without a conversation with the United States.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think what the United States has done is distanced itself from the Israeli attack in Syria on the Iranian embassy and is putting itself in the position where it can stand clear of the fallout from this. And I think that's probably a wise course of action because I'm confident they didn't say that we would have counseled against it. They just said you didn't talk to us in advance and you put us in jeopardy as the result of that. But I think it's pretty clear that this is setting the stage for America to take a much more hands-off position with respect to at least this next act of reprisal.
So because you're an ally doesn't mean that we as an ally to other nations that they can do unilaterally whatever it is they want to do, and we're gonna back them.
Right. And that's part of the debate about the support of Israel in Congress and this question of whether people are pro or anti-Israel because of the fact that they might be making constructive criticism of how Israel is carrying out this war relates to this very issue. Some would say that the United States, in backing Israel, is obligated to back Israel no matter what Israel does with respect to defending itself, because everything it does in defense of itself is supportable. And others are now beginning to question that and saying, well, there are some kinds of conduct that Israel might take in defense of itself that we need to reconsider.
Sandy, there's never been, I guess, a time in my lifetime that there weren't, wars going on all over the world. Somebody's always at war, right? I mean,
Well, actually, that is kind of true, and we've had small skirmishes in South America. But during the Cold War, there actually were a remarkably small number of actual hot conflicts. The détente that was the Cold War and the lines that were drawn and the extent to which they were honored by both sides in the Cold War meant that what did we have? We had Korea, we had Vietnam.
Philippines.
We had some problems in the Philippines that was more revolution than not, but very little in the way of any kind of hot war conflicts. And it wasn't until the Soviet Union fell apart in '91 that the Balkans became a hot war after that, and then the whole Mideast.
So do you think the rationale back then, we were still close enough to, the weapons that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that people knew the impact. There were people are still alive who witnessed the impact of that and never wanted to ever see that again. And now we're so far removed from that, there aren't a whole lot of people left.
Well, I think that what happened then was that the world was essentially divided into two powers, two empires, the Soviet Empire and the American Empire. And the empires had no real interest in clashing with one another. And so that's what the détente was, essentially the peace of the Cold War, because the empires understood that. After the collapse of the Soviet Empire, the American hegemony was what was left, and the rest of the world sort of fragmented into all its various pieces. And it's when the world is in a bunch of pieces that we seem to find ways to fight with one another. The Balkans was the first, and that was, of course, everyone talks about being Balkanized, meaning to be cut into fragments and small pieces, because the Balkan republics, were temporarily at peace when they were Yugoslavia, but historically the Balkans have been at one another's throats forever, and they went back to being at one another's throats with the collapse of the Yugoslavia.
Sandy, maybe you and I and our generation, once we're gone, maybe people won't spend time as much talking about these things that you and I talk about, especially globally, and the The fact that how easily people can be, these major nations can be drawn into these kind of conflicts, because for the most part, the American people don't sweat these kinds of things. I don't think there are many Americans who are concerned or worried about whether or not Iran strikes Israel. It doesn't impact their daily lives, but
Well, I think what happens is we deal with it in sort of a blood sport kind of a notion, but the sport being the operative term there. We've got the Atlantic and the Pacific that protect us, insulate us from the likelihood that it would ever happen on our soil. And so every time we ever get involved in one of these military conflicts, it's by our own choice, and we decide to send troops someplace. We tend to do it under the rubric that we're preserving the freedom of Americans, but that isn't really the circumstance that we're involved with. It's we make a decision that we decide we want to be involved in some place. So, we were involved in Afghanistan. We started out with a significant reason, 9/11, but then it got prolonged into nation building and a failed nation building. We got involved in Iraq for the very purpose of nation building. That collapsed, didn't work, but we were there many years. But we weren't defending America's freedom in either circumstance.
yeah, just Sandy, you know, I forgot what general we've sent to Israel to have conversation and dialogue about what Israel should be expecting from Iran. I guess, as you stated, proxy from Iran, but whatever it is, I don't know how you stop it now. Um, Something's going to take place that's going to lead to something else. And I don't know how you put that genie back in the bottle.
Well, I don't know.
We hope that it doesn't happen.
Yeah,
But
the bottle's been out. The cork has been out of the Mideast bottle for quite a while. So my hope is that it's temperate.
all right, 844-967-2789 is the number. You're tuned into the Earl Ingram Show.
Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. And I say it's alright. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun.
It was a teenage wedding and the old folks wished him well. You could see that Pierre did truly love the mademoiselle. And now the young monsieur and
I can see John Travolta.
Yeah, doing the twist.
Doing the twist.
Yeah. All right. Welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. Text us at that same number. Sandy,
I think that was the music in Pulp Fiction. In
Yeah,
which he does
Pulp
the
Fiction.
twist. Yeah.
Pulp Fiction, 844-967-2789 is the number. Sandy, we've been talking about some heavy subjects this morning because they are worthy. Each one of the subjects that we are talking about, I think, worthy of us having those discussions. Let's go to David from Mequon. Good morning to you, David. You say what?
Good morning, gentlemen. Just for the record, I'm just giving you guys a heads up. Iran is going to be attacking within the next 48 hours. It's going to
Oh,
happen. It's
you
going to
know
come
that?
directly from
You've
Yes.
got inside information?
Yes.
Oh,
correct.
Well, I mean, I think what you've reported is exactly what the American intelligence reported as well, that it should be expected within the next 2 days. Yeah.
Israeli intelligence. I have the gentleman that was on your show about a month after the initial attack on Israel on October
Right.
7th.
well,
Right.
If you go back to November 7th on your show, that was my wife's cousin that you had on the radio. And he does have connections with higher officials than you realize.
no, so David,
And so let me finish what I'm saying, Earl, please. So at the end of the day, and I sent you a link as well, Earl. That
you send me
back on
many
the
links,
13th
Dave.
of March, yes, where the Biden administration actually waived any, allowed Iran to get access to $10 billion of escrow money. So why did he do that? I have no idea why.
It was their money.
But we essentially we're pitting.
It was their
the
money,
government.
David.
Well, actually, I think it never came out of escrow. I think he took the action, and I think it never came out of the escrow. Are you sure it came out of escrow and that they actually got the money?
Yes. So there was an article I sent. It was from March 14th, and it showed that was allowed, that Biden waived all that.
Hey,
and
David,
the problem is
it was their money.
really
Yes.
their money. So they get a right to use that money towards destroying another country with it.
Well,
They have
David,
the right
David,
to-
I'm not arguing that point. You asked me why they were allowed and Joe Biden would give them the money. It's their money. It's the same argument that people said that Barack Obama gave Iran money. It was their money that we had been holding for decades.
And so my question to you is, Earl, do you know how asinine that sounds coming from you? That you really are willing
Dave,
to give the money back.
hey, Dave, let's put some things in perspective. You're being disrespectful, and I disagree with things that you say, and you have not heard me say things to you in that manner, and I'm not going to tolerate it from you here or anywhere else. We can have a discussion based on principles, but we're not going to have discussions based on you or anybody else. You have a right to your opinion, but you don't have a right to be disrespectful. Now,
So at the end of the day, I guess we do differ, and you support countries that are willing to absolutely wipe other countries off the planet.
that's a ridiculous.
okay.
It's a ridiculous statement. You have not heard that come from my lips. And as I stated, what is fact? The fact of the matter is the dollars that Iran received from Barack Obama and the dollars that they received from President Biden were their dollars that we've been holding.
Well, let's, I understand the rhetoric that has been used by Khomeini and others in Iran has been very inflammatory with respect to Israel. But their conduct, however, has been far more restrained. Their conduct has been restricted, I think, to Hezbollah conduct. Hezbollah has been definitely a problem for Israel on occasion. And however, I'm not sure it's been as much of a problem as Hamas. And I'm not sure that either one of them has the wherewithal or has demonstrated a likelihood that they intend a frontal assault on Israel to eliminate it. I understand the rhetoric that has occurred in the past, but I'm not sure that the conduct belies that rhetoric.
Well, so Sandy, I think to say that President Biden and the whole President Biden accountable, the president of the United States, for doing something that is unjust is what I'm challenging.
Well, I think that that the situation in the Mideast is hot and getting hotter. And the question really is, what is the appropriate situation? How does peace get accomplished in the Mideast? And I think that there was a movement in the direction of peace with the recognition of Israel by a number of countries. I think that actually the situation between Iran and Israel was softening materially in the last 3 years. And it was being brokered to some extent by Saudi Arabia. And so I'm just not sure that falling back on the Khomeini rhetoric that was so inflammatory at this point in time is moving the ball forward in any regard. And so, I think the situation is what it is. And I'm not sure that Israel's attack on the embassy was something that they would do again. Maybe it is, but I'm not sure that the success they achieved in terms of who it was that was killed in that embassy attack is going to be worth the measure.
Am I still on?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize. So just for the record, Sandy, Iran is using Hamas as a proxy war. They have been helping them. They've been working over in Syria. That's why there was an attack in Syria. And consequently, the people that were killed there, some of those were the leaders that actually helped coordinate the attack on October 7th. So I'm not sure how you're not correlating the two with Iran and Hamas, but it's a little surprising to me.
No, I think that the extent to which, I think that it's been clear that Hamas has been obtaining weapons. I think that the flow of weapons to them was coming through Qatar and other countries as well. I think that I just think that you have to measure results and risks, and the risk benefit ratio associated with the attack on the embassy might well not be a good one. That's all.
So Sandy, I want to delve a little deeper into that on the other side. 844-967-2789 is the number.
They had a teenage wedding and the old folks wished them well.
a year. I'm in love with you now. Do you think I'm fooling when I say I love you? I love you. Maybe you'll
Welcome back.
believe me when I'm
To the
finally
Earl
through.
Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. And I'm telling you now,
Yeah.
that those were very simplistic kinds
I'm
of.
telling you now. So just to straighten out something I said in response to Dave, I looked it up. The 10 billion has been released out of escrow, and it has gone to Iran, supposedly to be held in euros and to be used for restricted purposes. But I know that people in Dave's shoes who would argue that money's money, and that the more money that Iran has to use for things that it has to use money for, the more money it has to use for things like supporting Hezbollah and Hamas. And I don't disagree with that. But I do question, in terms of Israeli policy, and what I was trying to question was the cost benefit ratio analysis, the risk benefit ratio analysis that Israel must have conducted before it attacked an embassy, because embassies have been asylum for a long, long period of time. And as notorious as the people might be who are in asylum in embassies, it's very, very rare in world history for embassies to be attacked.
So let me ask you
So,
something.
so I think that's really the circumstance now that makes this a bit more dire.
So to follow along that train of thought. So if Hezbollah is in an embassy anywhere else in the world, that means Israel reserves the rights to attack
Well, I don't.
the
Yeah,
embassy.
I mean, maybe I'm not.
I-
Speaking,
no,
I'm,
no,
not-
no,
I'm not
no,
speaking
no.
for Dave.
No,
but-
I know
but-
you're not, but I'm saying from the perspective of what Dave is saying.
Yes, and that's the issue is, is it proper to attack someone who's held in great disrepute or is viewed as a war criminal? Is it proper to attack an embassy in order to obtain access to that person? And
The answer to that is no.
typically under international law, that has not been carried out, because that would be the same as attacking them on the soil of Iran. Now, maybe Israel would have been willing to carry out such an attack into Iran, but they haven't done that.
You know what I'm saying? And then to disavow what comes after the attack. They were there, so that gave us the right to do it. And so Iran is saying, hey, man, you attacked us.
Well, like I said, war is a whole process of risk benefit analysis. I'm not a war tactician. I didn't go to war college. I can't
None of
allege.
us.
I can't
None of
allege that
us.
I'm an expert on it. But
Right.
my amateur estimation is that this was probably a miscalculation in terms of risk benefit.
All right, let's do this. Unprecedented and stunning number of Trump administration alums oppose his reelection. So, Sandy, we've talked about Trump before. A minimum of 16 Trump administration veterans have sharply criticized the ex-president with terms such as threat to democracy, erratic, delusional, and narcissistic. And they have banded together to send a harrowing statement that the American people should be leery of putting this man back into the White House. And I would say, Sandy, that many of these people that we are talking about were his close allies while he was in the White House. Trusted, right?
Yeah.
These are the people who he sat down and supped with. And when there were things to be discussed, serious decisions to be made, these are his intelligentsia. These aren't the people who are, the waiters and the busboys.
No, these are people who are there to listen to his more innermost thoughts. These are people who are there to watch his conduct and see how it is that he makes decisions, how it is he behaves generally, what his thought processes might seem to be, what his values might seem to be with respect to public policy. I mean, regardless of personal values, there are public policy values to be measured. And these are the things that these people are warning us about. And it strikes me that as it would be prudent for us to, in doing our due diligence for who we're going to vote for, to listen to the people who might know him best. And it seems like a substantial number of people who knew him best are warning us in extreme ways, trying to get our attention, trying to tell us that this is a serious problem. And I'm surprised that more people aren't listening.
So Sarah Matthews was working in the White House on January 6, 2021, when a mob of former President Donald Trump supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol in an attempt to stop the certification of President Joe Biden's victory. She saw how Trump's staff tried to get him to condemn the violence for hours without success. In my eyes, it was a complete dereliction of duty that he did not uphold his oath of office, Matthews told the USA Today. I lost all faith in him that day. Matthews resigned from her job as deputy press secretary. In the wake of the January 6th, she views Trump as a threat to democracy who tried to steal the 2020 election and would do it again. This was a deputy press secretary, Sandy, somebody who followed the president everywhere and was privy to all sorts of information.
Well, there are people who were his chief of staff there. The list of people who are concerned isn't just deputy press secretaries.
Mike Pence, vice president.
It's the vice president it's people who were chief of staff. It's people who served in all different roles, who saw him from all different perspectives. We should just listen. We should gather this evidence, and we should definitely take it into account.
Sandy, more and more and more. Mike Pence, Mike Esper, John Bolton, national security officials. Like you said, these aren't, bumps on the logs.
Right.
And what does it take, Sandy, for a person who was there with a president of the United States for 4 years and, who day in, day out for 4 years helped shape the policy of the United States and the future of our country. And that's a sacred trust. Is it safe to say that? I mean, anybody who's that close, those are sacred trusts. Nikki Haley and others, and for them to now come out and make these and give a warning, Sandy, is what they're doing. They're giving a warning.
Yeah, they're trying to send up a flare, and they're trying every which way to do it, doing it singularly, doing it in groups. I mean, I think they're seriously worried about it. They're running ads, trying to get our attention and tell us what it is that we need to know as we do our due diligence to figure out who we're going to vote for. And the question is, are we going to be smart about our due diligence? Are we going to have our eyes wide open or not? And that's the worrisome thing.
John Bolton, a stalwart of Republican administrations for decades, said the long list of Trump's critics from within the White House shows that questions about him go well beyond simple policy disagreements. The stunning thing about the number of senior Trump administration officials who campaigned against him, I think, proves that it really is Trump's flawed character, lack of knowledge, lack of philosophy, lack of fitness that has them concerned, Bolton said. And I'm not a guy who ever looked at John Bolton as a stand-up guy. Okay.
I don't know about stand-up, but I never agreed with his hawkish policies. But I think that he has the better interest of the country in mind. I think he did with his policies. I just didn't agree with them. But I think the real problem with Donald Trump is what he put his finger on, which is there's no policy. There's no there. There's no policy there other than what it takes to get Donald Trump elected president and to put himself into a position of power.
So let's talk about that verbiage, policy, that word policy, because I think when people, support and elect and vote for people, they do it because they like the person. They're charismatic. And they don't know much about the policy aspect of it. Why is that the thing that is so important, Sam?
Well, I think that was a turning point that essentially in the John Kennedy campaign. I think that presidential elections didn't tend to be so much about charisma, particularly when there wasn't TV to convey the charisma, and there was basically news media, print to carry the information about a candidate. And that sort of insulated the person from being tested for charisma. But ever since John Kennedy, it's frequently been a charismatic race. Who do the people like the most? Who is it that gets them most excited? And unfortunately, politicians have found it easier and easier to get elected by ducking from discussions of policy, making the policy discussions as vague as possible so that they can ride the crest of just a couple of issues and charisma. And I think the American public would be far better suited if we spent much more time testing the policy of the debates that are had. You'd think those debates would be all about policy, but they aren't. They're soundbite arguments, and they aren't policy discussions. And so Donald Trump has been able to get away with being this powerful political figure without ever enunciating a personal policy about just about anything. And he announced that he would appoint conservative judges, and he did that. But he has never enunciated what his policies are. He talks about solving things like the Ukraine war in one day, but he doesn't explain how he's going to do it or what his underlying policy would be. He promised during the 2020 election that he would make healthcare better than Obamacare. There was never a program, never an idea, never a policy, just a statement. That's the problem. We need to get away from outcome statements and get back to what it is what policies we are going to implement and where they're going to take us.
Well, I think, Sandy, clearly the media understands talking about policy may be boring to the American people. It may be, not as juicy as, there we go with that word again.
Yeah.
As the tabloid kinds of discussions. And I really do honestly believe, Sandy, and hope people don't get angry with me, that, back in the 1980s, I remember Look magazine and Time magazine talking about the dumbing down of the American people. Do you remember that conversation that was being had?
Oh yeah, and I think it was actually a strategy that I remember because I was on the fringe of politics, but the advisors to politicians always talked about dumbing down, okay, making things
conversation.
simple, making the conversation simple, making it something that could be remembered on an elevator and repeated. It was all about the process. Was all about dumbing things down to make them simple and to be evocative emotion rather than thought. And people have become very good at that in politics. And Donald Trump, untrained in politics, became very good at it because that's what branding is all about. Branding is all about evoking an emotion with something. Okay. So, I would agree with Donald Trump that he's been very good at branding. Branding is not something that involves policy.
844-967-2789 is the number. Sandy, we're going to talk a little bit about the United States Supreme Court and are there any guardrails for the United States Supreme Court? 844-967-2789 is the number. It's Friday. That means Friday is my co-host, Sandy Williams, and you.
And I will be sure I'm in love with you now. I'm telling you now. I'm telling you right away. I'll be saying for many a day, I'm in love with you now. Do you think I'm fooling when I say I love you? I love you. Maybe you'll believe me when I'm Who wants to buy this diamond ring? She took it off her finger now. It doesn't mean a thing. This diamond ring doesn't shine for me anymore, and this diamond ring doesn't mean what it did before. So if you got someone whose love is true, let it shine for you.
61. 65. All right. Welcome back. Not the age, not our age.
No.
Welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. You can text us at that same number. You know, Sandy, I love going back to the old songs, you know, when you and I were both young, and brings back memories, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's sort of like olfactory memories. You know, you never forget a smell. You know,
You're right.
and music has the same effect. You know, sort of takes you back nostalgically in a way that's very visceral.
Yeah, you see, I know the lyrics to
Yeah,
many of those things. So let's do this, Sandy. The Supreme Court.
the
And
Supremes. Here we are.
and I always thought, you know, three branches of government: judicial, presidential, and
The elected.
the elected. So the Supreme Court has a powerful role in the forming of our government. And it's not by accident that they're held in such a high position in the interconnectedness of our government. Sandy, how is it possible that the Supreme Court judges, some of them, have gotten caught up in things that I think really are ridiculous, benefiting from things that, you know?
Well, it's a little bit maybe like when Clinton finally explained himself and he said, "It's because I can."
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what it is. I think human beings tend to test the edge of the envelope, and if the envelope doesn't have an edge or the edge is overbroad, they'll go too far. And the Supreme Court necessarily needs to be not subjugated to Congress. Okay, it needs to be separate from. It needs to be have an equal footing with Congress, because it's going to be testing the laws of Congress and deciding whether they're constitutional or not, and rejecting some and accepting others. And you know that's been an important aspect of our governmental system is the ability to operate under the rule of law as interpreted not by the legislators but by a court who are going to have a longer view of what the law is and should be and will measure it against the Constitution. Um, so it's a delicate balance. But it is true that Supreme Court justices can be impeached by Congress. If they commit high crimes or misdemeanors and meet the standard for impeachment. There has been one that's been impeached, I think, in the past that involved bribery. But that impeachment process needs to be carefully utilized. It can't be utilized on a regular basis because at that point Congress would be exercising a power that would put the Supreme Court under its thumb, and we can't have that. We were all worried about that. Netanyahu in Israel was trying to change their balance of power by making the Supreme Court decision subject to being overturned by their legislature. That's a very troublesome issue. That really puts the Supreme Court under the legislature instead of equal to it. And in our case, in our country, we don't want to do that. But we do have to find a way to make sure that our Supreme Court justices operate ethically.
You know, Sandy, I don't know if historically um, the kinds of things that have been going on with the United States Supreme Court, some members of the United States Supreme Court, namely Clarence Thomas and probably others, was so prominent, or if they are the ones who have done this, or maybe the media wasn't, you know, inclined to follow other Supreme Court justices over the decades and centuries as they are now. So I don't know if this is new or if it's pervasive, but certainly, Sandy, there should be some oversight that Supreme Court justices don't, take perks. And so they're taking perks for a reason. Somebody's giving you perks because they're expecting something from you. And I think if we don't have something in place to challenge that, it's easy for people to do what Clarence Thomas has done, which threatens, I think, the belief in the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking that, Justice Anton Scalia died at a fancy hunt club in Texas where he was off with a bunch of wealthy people. That should have opened people's eyes, that event alone. Like, what is a justice doing in that circumstance? And then we find out that it's probably more common than it should be, and certainly has been common in the conduct by Clarence Thomas. So I think the Supreme Court, the first thing they need to do, and I think they are taking some steps to do this, is to create their own ethical standards. The fact is they've operated without any written ethical standards to be measured against. Okay, that's license in right there, right? That's a license to have a broad ambit to what it is you can do, and it needs to be constrained. Hopefully, Justice Roberts will guide them in the direction of having a set of ethical standards that can withstand review by the public and say, yeah, this is a fair and right ethical standards to hold these people against.
So you're suggesting that
and then
they
have
write their
public
own,
reporting.
Are you suggesting that they write their own standards?
Well, sure. I'm not sure that people can't write their own ethical standards.
That's kind of like
I think it's okay if they write them so long as they're public and they can be perused and to be understood to be fair by third-party observers.
That's kind of like saying to Congress, hey, we want you guys to pass term limitations.
Well,
ain't going to happen.
I think it is going to happen with the Supreme Court because I think Roberts recognizes that otherwise the Supreme Court will be held to standards by Congress, and that if they put themselves under the thumb of Congress, they will be subjugating the court to the congressional controls in a way that would be contrary to the interests of the Constitution. And hopefully, the court itself respects the Constitution and the principles enough to impose on themselves reasonable standards. I'm confident the reasonable standards won't be awfully puritanical. It might give them some latitude.
All right. That's Sandy Williams. Sandy, we'll see you again on next Tuesday. Enjoy the weather. Calvin, enjoy the weather. Thank you for a great week as always, Calvin. Up next, Jane Matner on air, and Greg Bott. Enjoy the weather.
Let it shine for you.